Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for logging on to our webinar today. We're just going to give it a few minutes before we get started because we can just see that we've still got some attendees that are logging on. Like I said, we'll just give it a few minutes and then we will start very shortly. Thank you. Hello to you all that are just logging on now. I was just explaining, we're just going to wait a few moments because we can see quite a few attendees are still just jumping on. So we'll give it another couple of minutes and then we'll go ahead and get started. Okay, right. So I think that got most of the people that are logging on at the moment. So we'll go ahead and get started. So once again, thank you to you all for joining us this afternoon for our webinar on managing your remote workers and those that are currently furloughed. We hope that this will be really useful for you all. And obviously both Lisa and I will be available afterwards if you've got any kind of questions, and we'll cover off the ways to contact us at the end. First of all, we'll just do a couple of introductions. Just to let you know that we've also got Duncan Turner on the webinar today, a colleague of mine from Harvard. So he will be available at the end with myself and Lisa for some questions. Lisa, if it's okay with you, I'll just get you just to introduce yourself.
Yeah, thank you.
Take it over.
Okay, yeah, hi everyone. I'm a chartered psychologist and a psychotherapist, and I am based in Oxfordshire, and I work with organisations at all levels to help people be their best in the workplace.
Okay, thank you. And my name is Zoe Lidster from Harvard HR Solutions. So sure some of you I know already, but we provide outsourced HR support for all size businesses, all things HR, and operate nationwide. So today, really, we're going to just try to provide you with some advice and guidance on managing those employees that are working from home. focusing on both the practical elements and the ways to keep them engaged and performing at their best. We're also going to look at those on furlough and your duties to those individuals. I think there's been some miscommunication and some confusion around communicating with those individuals. So we'll look at what you can and can't do. I'll be taking you through the first half of the webinar today from the HR standpoint, and then Lisa's going to take you through how to support your team to be the best and your responsibility for the well-being of those employees. So we will hold a Q&A session at the end, so please feel free to use the chat functionality at the side of your screen to ask any questions that you've got, and we'll try and get through any we can. We will be sure though to send out a Q&A sheet at the end of the session, and we'll include all the responses to all of the questions that we get. So if we miss your question, then please don't worry, we will get to answer that for you. So firstly on then to the employees working from home. So just focusing on some of the practical elements really, first off. For many organisations, really working from home is a new territory, and with the current situations, lots of organisations have had to act fast, setting their employees up to work from home with sort of really little or no planning at all, and just to do the best they can to get their employees set up and able to enable them to work as kind of normal as possible. So for some that's been a lot easier than others. Some people have had to make huge investments buying IT equipment, etc., to enable the employees to work off of their laptops and setting up with phone systems and all sorts. So it has been a struggle for some. Others maybe already had working from home policies in place and had some of their staff that were already doing so, but certainly in regards to furlough, that's kind of new for everybody. So there are many considerations really that you should be thinking about. Appreciate obviously we've set up now, but there could be a need for this for the foreseeable future. So even as lockdown releases, there's going to be a need for people to be working from home, probably for the best part of the rest of the year really, while social distancing measures etc are still in place. It's just not feasible to have everybody returning back to the workplace. So one of the considerations is obviously around the health and safety. So you as employers do have a duty to take reasonable care for the health and safety of your employees and ensure that you take reasonable steps to ensure that employees have a suitable place to work at home. So again, this is a situation outside of the norm, and I would emphasize that as well. So it is reasonable steps. You can only do your best. Things like assessments that you should be done, so working space assessments, DSE assessments that you would normally carry out, obviously you're not able to do. So I'd encourage you to think about perhaps having the employees complete those assessments themselves, remotely and online, just really to cover you off there, because failure to do this could result in things like personal injury claims, etc. And then investigations from the HSE, which nobody wants to have to deal with. So I think that it's just to highlight again, do your best and make reasonable adjustments, do what's reasonable in this situation to ensure that those employees are comfortable, and have somewhere that they can work, that it's not putting them at any risk. So home working policies, temporary home working policy, not 100% essential, but really it is a good way to set out detail around what's expected from those individuals while they're working from home, and another protection from you. So talking about things like their working hours, making sure they're taking regular breaks, they're working the hours that they're supposed to work. The health and safety side of things again is taken care of. So just highlighting that they need to complete assessments, raise issues to you. Again, just reminding them as well, calling in sick, things like that. They're still working, although albeit from home. If they're not working on that day, they need to notify you in the normal way. Equipment. So it's important to ensure that they have the right tools they need. and support that they can call upon. So whether that's IT support or somebody else remotely that can help them out if they're having troubles with their equipment, because if people are left expecting to get on to their day to day, they're not particularly tech savvy, it can really cause people to feel disengaged. They feel anxious because they're not able to do their job to their normal ability. So just checking in with them, making sure they've got the right stuff that they need. um, Providing training and guidance on working remotely. So consider that some of your employees might never have used some of the facilities before. We're all switching now to Zoom, Skype, all these different types of remote sessions, conference facilities that lots of employees will never have used. So it's important to make sure that they feel comfortable using those tools. Just check in with them and make sure they know how to dial in. And some people won't feel comfortable using the video conference facility. Try to encourage them to do so, because face-to-face contact's great, but bear in mind that some people are going to find that quite difficult. The working time regulations as well. So just ensure that your employees are taking the breaks that they should be taking during their working hours, because I think it's very easy when you're working at home to get caught up and focused on what it is you're working on, and before you know it, the day has gone by and you haven't stopped to take a break. It's really important that you remind employees to do so, and encourage the use of their annual leave. So if they are they've had a heavy week and there's lots going on, remind them they can still take annual leave, and to think about how they have a break again from time to time, because we're already quite a number of weeks in now. There could be a lot more weeks of working from home, so just making sure that they're using that appropriately. So just a few more practical elements to consider. So just be flexible and understanding of the individual circumstances. We have to understand that lots of people working from home have various different situations. Some of them are, caring for vulnerable people. They might have young children at school, at home that they're trying to homeschool, or very small children that are going to demand some of their attention. So you just need to be open to potentially having to flex around some of the hours that they might need for this. It might be just that they need to start a couple of hours earlier in the morning, or whatever that might be. Now, obviously, depending on how your business can work, it will depend on how flexible you can be. But I think it's just a time to be sensitive of those needs. Considerations for change in performance. There might be lots of added pressures at home, unfamiliar with the systems that they're having to use. So while we will still continue to manage the employees' performance and work output as you would in a normal way, you might need to just have extra considerations around this due to some of those added pressures. And disciplinary action. So it might still be necessary to carry out disciplinary proceedings, but we just need to be mindful on the steps that we take, the practical steps in doing so. So if we have to carry out disciplinary hearings, for example, over the phone via video con, do we want to make sure it's not being recorded? Because if your policy says that you don't record those meetings, then make sure that the stuff you're using isn't recording. Remind them as well that they're not to be recording any of it, and still be able to provide them with their right to be accompanied. So they have to have somebody dial in with them potentially, or you might have to flex your policy slightly to allow maybe a family member that's at home to sit in and attend that meeting as well. All things that you just want to make sure that you plan ahead well to be able to deliver those meetings in a way that can work in this particular situation. So looking at some of the ways to keep your employees engaged then. So engagement might not be something that's at the forefront of your mind at the moment, but it's so important. And why? Well, now more than ever, we need to ensure that those employees are engaged, because so much uncertainty at the moment, disruption to the daily lives, worries about what the business will look like when they have to come back, will they have a job. It's essential that we focus on those people right now to ensure that they remain engaged, continue to perform at a high level, both now and for when your business returns to whatever that's going to look like. One thing that we do know is that life's unlikely ever to be quite the same again. So we want these people on board so they can work and flex with you as you develop your plans into how to bring people back, or how you're going to structure the business and the way that the individuals will work going forward. The way that people feel really determines the way they act, so their output. The way that they're managed determines how they're feeling. So it's really important as line managers, employers, that you're focusing on the way that we are managing those individuals right now. Communication is easily probably the most crucial thing to maintain engagement. So it's important that you continue to hold regular meetings with the team, both the usual team meetings that you would have normally. So if you hold monthly one-to-ones, make sure you continue to do so to the best of your ability. Try to keep things as normal as possible. Have a check-in with them from time to time as well, maybe as well as your usual scheduled meetings, just to ensure that they're coping, and that they're understanding what it is that's expected from them, and just an opportunity really as a forum to vent anything they need to you. Provide regular updates to them on the current coronavirus situation. Make sure that they understand that you're continually reviewing that, reviewing the standpoint there, and you understanding what the plan is going to look like, and that you'll keep them up to date. That you don't have any information right now, even if that's the case, but that you will tell them. It's really important that they're just kept in the loop. Ask them how they're feeling, maybe to talk to them about the highs and lows of the week that they've had so far, because again, you'll be able to get a feel for those people that may be struggling, and perhaps it's things that you don't know are going on within the team. So it's worth taking time out. Face-to-face communication is really important too. We mentioned earlier that sometimes it might be difficult. Some people might not feel great about having to do video conferencing, but it really is quite important, and it really helps to build engagement levels, because you are able to communicate on a different level when it's face to face. For some of those that are working in isolation as well, they might not be seeing people very often, so it's important for well-being as well, that employees are able to see their teams and their managers, and really be able to engage in conversation properly with them. So try and allow on your team meetings for a bit of socialization as well, not just the kind of the usual meeting structure. It doesn't mean that you have to spend loads of time chit-chatting, and some people won't want to talk about anything personal, and that's fine, but just make it a bit more of an open forum, so that people can have a chat too, maybe at the beginning or the end of the meeting. Make sure, as we said, though, that it's not mandatory, because some people will decide that they don't want to be on video, and but just encourage that where possible, really, and encourage the employees and the team to stay in touch with one another as well, as they would in a normal way if they were in the office. So show support. Many employees, as we've said, have been trying to balance their childcare, homeschooling, work commitments. It's a whole new world of working for us. So many employers are going to need to start to accept that there's going to be some disruption, and that working parents, they will struggle to be as productive as normal. But if you speak to them and talk to them about it, then try to figure out a way that they're going to be able to fulfill all their work commitments, and manage daily home life as well. You'll get a lot more out from them if you can be a bit more flexible. If you're helping them, they're going to want to help you. And also, it's important as well for me, is reminding the other employees to be mindful of everybody's individual situations. So not going into any detail, of course, but just saying that remember that if you at home have no other commitments, you can sit and you can work all day uninterrupted, because you don't have these other family commitments, whether it's a vulnerable person or children. Others do. So just remind them to be aware of that as well, and try not to be frustrated with people, because you know, if someone in the team isn't as quick at getting something they need completed on a project as they normally would be, it, you know, we don't want to take our frustrations out on those people. They're all doing the best they can, so it's worth just making the team aware and getting them just to take time to think about that. Set clear guidelines and expectations. Be clear on what's expected of them when they're working from home. No different to what you normally would do, but again, it's a different situation, so remind them of that. Things like the hours they need to be available to others, if there's any flexibility. You know, if the business if the business doesn't need them to be working 9 till 5, then you know, would some slightly different hours work? Just keep going back to that really. Reminding employees to stick to their hours though and take breaks, and be clear on the daily tasks and how you're going to be measuring their performance, because if we're going to be talking to them about lack of performance at any point, you know, we need to have set the clear expectations up front. And you know, lastly, just say thank you. Thanks to employees goes a long way. You know, it's an acknowledgement that it's a tough time for everybody, but you know, that you are appreciative of how they're adapting to their new working environments. Understand that there are added pressures at this time, and that you recognise the efforts that have been made from them, because you know, a little bit of praise goes a long way, and you know, just work hard. It works well to keep employees engaged. So on to our furloughed employees then. I think there has been a bit of confusion around what we can and can't do with them. So hopefully this is going to clear some of that up a little bit. I've actually been speaking to some people just this week who attended a webinar that I think caused some confusion around whether they can and can't speak to these employees. So practical considerations then, you know, if you've put them on furlough already and the agreement's been signed, depending on how long you originally said they were going to be furloughed for, ensure that you're extending that agreement if appropriate. So if you have already, if you said it was going to end May and now you're going to carry on furloughing to the end of June, sorry, you need to make sure that you're writing to them to confirm that there is an extension of that original agreement. Same with bringing the employees back from furlough if needed. So you can bring employees back for a period of time. So if suddenly there is some work for them to do, you can bring them back for say a week, have them complete that, and then you can place them back on furlough. Just remember though, it must be a minimum of 3 weeks each time they are furloughed. Again, you need to write to them to confirm that you're bringing them back, and same with if you have to return them to furlough. So, you know, we can help with letter templates for those if they're needed. So if anybody does need those, just drop us an email and we'll be able to help out with that. Take personal contact details. So personal email, phone number, some way of keeping in contact with those people that are furloughed. And I say personal because ideally, you need to make sure that they're not really accessing their work emails while they're off, because as we know, employees must not do any work while they're furloughed. Again, there is some conversation around this piece at the moment, because lots of employers have taken the standpoint to set an out of office on and say basically that the person's furloughed, so those emails are then you know, redirected and dealt with elsewhere, which is, you know, absolutely fine and probably the best way to make sure that employees aren't working or feel like they should be checking their emails. However, do bear in mind that potentially the work email address may be the only email address that they have. So if it is that you allow personal emails, they may well be using this to keep in contact with their friends and family. So by removing that, it could be removing them from a way of contacting those people. So just have that in mind, but do try to make sure, like I said, you take their personal contact details. So as we just said, they must not do any work at all while they're furloughed. And you know, just to add to that as well, directors who are furloughed can perform statutory duties, but not any revenue generating work. Otherwise, though, everybody else should not be doing anything for you at all. Depending on your contract of employment, others they can take on work or volunteer for other organisations, provided that there's no conflict there. And usually it would be that if they want to work for another organisation, they need to seek the authorisation from you. So while I think there is no direct conflict and there's nothing that's going to affect your organisation, then we should probably allow them to do that work. But it would really depend on your contract of employment, so you just need to review that as to what that says. Communication. So as I said, there seems like there has been some confusion at the moment around whether you can or can't contact them while they're on furlough. So the answer is yes, you can and you should. Regular communications helps them to feel part of the team, particularly if other people in the organisation are still working. Some of these people now, may have been furloughed for a number of weeks, and if they're sat at home, potentially on their own, with no communication from you, you could have some serious kind of effects on these guys. Also, like I said, if we get to 8, 12 weeks down the line, they've been furloughed, it's not doing a lot for keeping them engaged with the business. So really important that you do have regular communication with them. Keep them updated on the current situation and the company plans, as we said as well, for the people that are working from home. But you can't ask many questions about work. So if it's that you suddenly need to know where this particular invoice went and whether it was paid, etc., that's a no-no. So you can't talk to them about work or anything, or asking them to do any work in any way. It's just purely for updates on the situation. What are the company plans? So what you're working towards in terms of any returning. General updates, but nothing work specific as such. You can't ask them to forward on emails, because again, you're asking them to access the email system then. So just make sure that if you're going to be furloughing anyone else, or if you're bringing anyone back for a period of time, make sure that handovers are done before that time, so that you get everything you need from them. So training is another one that's been some sort of confusion around, but employees who are furloughed can engage in training, as long as that undertaking of that training does not provide any services to or generate revenue for or on behalf of the organisation. So furloughed employees should be encouraged to undertake the training, and where the training is undertaken by them, at the request of the employer, you must ensure that they're paid at least the appropriate national minimum wage. So in most cases, really, the furlough payment of 80% of their regular wage, or the cap of 2,500, is going to provide more than sufficient money to cover this. But where it isn't the case, you would need to make sure you top up that pay. So for me, training is really important, because a great way to keep those guys engaged, and also make use of their time, while they're off and furlough, while you haven't got anything else for them to do at the moment. So if there is training that needs to be completed, bear this in mind and put some in place. Give them a little bit of notice that they're going to be doing this training at this time, and just to double check that bit around pay to ensure that that's covered. So well-being, Lisa's going to talk a lot about this, so I won't kind of touch on it too much, but employers do have a duty to look after and ensure the well-being of their employees. So check in with them regularly, and some investment in training, so their career development will all help with this. So I'll now hand over to Lisa to talk you through that.
Thank you. Okay, so I'll just move. Okay, so as Zoe said, you've got a wellbeing responsibility for your employees, but actually it's a big ask of managers to take on the mental health and wellbeing of their teams, and I think it puts a lot of pressure on you. There's a sudden expectation that you have all these knowledge and skills and are able to look after people who are experiencing the situation quite differently. recently, a CIPD survey found that actually only about half of HR professionals believed that, or actually HR professionals believe that only about half of managers are in a good place to believe in the importance of well-being, and only about a third of them actually have sort of sensitive conversations that are necessary and help people signpost to appropriate help. And only about a quarter of them recognise the early signs of poor mental health. And without that awareness, without that level of knowledge and the skills to know how to support, it means managers are kind of a bit of a block in terms of knowing what the best thing is to do. So I think today I'm going to talk to you about recognising what those early signs are, and also to help to look after yourself, because you have to come first, and unless you're in a good place, it's going to be really hard for you to be able to do the best for your teams. So when we think about mental health and well-being, I'm just trying to get my slides to move on, sorry. Okay, sorry. So when we're looking at mental health and we think about the workplace, when I go into workplaces and I ask people about, what impact does work having on mental health, and it's usually a really long stream of, it's stressful, and I find it overwhelming, and all these kind of negative connotations we have around mental health. But actually, work has a huge impact on our mental health in positive ways. And when we think about mental health at work, our role at work often gives us a sense of identity and purpose. It's who we really are. It gives us the stability of having an income and a routine, knowing what's expected of us, having contact with other people, and actually offers a huge amount that benefits our mental health. And it's not only about our role, but it's actually about our sense of where we are, the culture of the place that we're part of, who's around us. So although your employees are working at home and might, for those who are still working from home and aren't furloughed, they might still be fulfilling what's supposed to be the same role, actually the impact that has on their mental health can look quite different, purely because of different circumstances. So, and we have to think with this as well about what can benefit our mental health for some employees actually is a barrier to other people's mental health. So for example, some of your employees who are maybe even furloughed, but certainly working from home, might be relishing the opportunity to develop things their own way, without having kind of detailed guidance from you as their manager, being able to organise their day and their workload how they want. And other people will need much more reassurance and guidance, knowing they need more support from you. And that's about you then knowing your employees really well and knowing what it is that is an opportunity for one person actually is a bit of a threat to someone else. So it's about considering the differences for your individual members of your team. Ultimately, it comes down to you really knowing your people. And I think for me, that's always the biggie when I talk to managers about. It's all about relationships. It's all about you really understanding your team and having that relationship where you have open communication and trust, so that you really do know what's going on for them. So I've got a problem with my mouse, sorry, it's not. Oh, there we are.
Can we just flick them on for you?
Yeah, if you can, because I've not got control of the mouse at the moment. I can see your mouse waving all over the screen. Thank you so much. Okay, so one of the useful ways of thinking about where your employees might be at is to consider the grief cycle. And depending on individuals, people will be at this in a very different, or be at different places in this as we go through this whole process. So it's thinking about where your employees are at. And again, this comes down to you really knowing your employees. So I think for most people, they've gone past this kind of denial, this can't possibly be happening stage. And some people are still in that angry phase in terms of this isn't fair. This surely can't be happening. And I think for some people, they will go backwards and forwards on this. So they might be transitioning along this cycle quite well and have got to a stage of acceptance we can do this, having that sense of we're more fortunate than some others, for example, and we need to make the most of these new opportunities, and we need to kind of focus on the silver linings. But you will have other people in your team who are perhaps feeling in a depressed state of this is awful, I can't cope. That sense of bargaining, maybe we can try and do it like this instead, maybe we can try and push the boundaries a little bit. So again, it's recognizing that your employees are at different stages, and having, sitting down with a pad and a pen and actually thinking, okay, who is in my team? Where do I think they're at? What is it that I'm recognizing in terms of their interaction, their language, their body language when I see them on video calls and so on? Where do I think they're at? And actually accepting the fact that they might go backwards. They might feel accepting of what's happening today, and then tomorrow they go backwards and they're just feeling really down and overwhelmed about the whole situation. And it's also worthwhile thinking about where you are on that cycle. So really looking at, your whole journey and being very aware of that, because I think as managers, you're very good at looking out for those people in your team and looking out for other people's well-being and what they should be doing, what they shouldn't be doing, and so on. But actually, it's important to take stock of where you're at and have that sense of starting with recognizing what's going on for you, what is working, what isn't working, and putting yourself in a good place. Just that sense of self-awareness. It doesn't mean you have to have the answers. It doesn't mean you have to get through that grief cycle as quickly as possible and get to that stage of acceptance before you can be any use to anyone else. It's not like that at all. It's just having that awareness and being able to be open and authentic with your team and saying, look, I'm also finding this really hard. I'm also feeling really angry about this. Or I'm actually, today I'm just feeling really overwhelmed with this. Having that sense of being open and communicating with your team allows them in turn to be open and communicate with you. I see too often managers who say, oh yeah, people can come and talk to me, they can tell me everything, but they don't open up, they're not modeling that themselves. So it's really important to allow yourself to be a little bit vulnerable and actually say, this is what it's really like. Would you mind moving on, Zoe? Thank you. So what does this really look like? So when we think about well-being, I mean, just the word well-being and mental health conjures up so many different things to different people. And I always start with a sense of perception and understanding that we all see the same situation differently. So we have to register well-being as a priority and acknowledge that priorities will change as individual circumstances change. So how people feel has to ebb and flow. We'll be on a high one day, we'll be on a low potentially the next. And we have to understand each person's individual circumstances. So really putting yourself in their shoes. So I really love the picture on the left of this slide, because I've got a friend who I spoke to a couple of weeks ago who was feeling on top of the world. That's that kind of image of, she's very, very happy. She's been furloughed. Her husband's working from home. He's usually away a lot. The kids are just happy and enjoying being at home. The sun was shining. She's like, this is brilliant. So she was feeling on top of the world. But you might have other people who are standing at the top of the mountain considering whether they should be leaping off, and in the sense of actually just feeling so overwhelmed, they really can't see through the fog. They can't see a way to move forward. The feeling of having their other half at home or their children at home, whatever, is actually the furthest that they want from their sense of an enjoyable day. So it's understanding individual perspectives and knowing that will change regularly. So actually you might have happy families one day and at a great workload one day, and the next day it all completely changes. And so I have that kind of notion of a jar in terms of our sense of resilience, and knowing that our jars are all either different sizes or they're full to different capacities. So some people will be, I was chatting to a friend of mine or a colleague of mine this morning, some people live on their own, they don't have children, they have a garden, they're enjoying that sense of enjoy their garden when they want, and so on. And there for them, they are feeling very, very happy, they're feeling very content. Other people's jars are almost overflowing, they're full, they have no capacity left. And so actually when you as a manager asks a member of your team to do something that might seem relatively small, relatively insignificant. It was just, would you mind just doing this? It can be the thing that completely sort of overrules everything going on for that person and just sends them into a sort of downward spiral. And I can completely relate to that. I think we all can relate to that. I had a complete nightmare this morning because our printer completely stopped working in our house, and I've got children trying to print off resources for homeschooling, and I was trying to print off notes or something, and it's that moment of feeling utterly stressed and utterly overwhelmed, and just recognizing that that's okay. And I think we can't change the reality of what's going on, but we can change our resilience by increasing that capacity of that jar. So it's helping employees, helping people in your team recognize where to focus their control. So we can spend so much time sweating the small stuff, but it's actually about focusing on what really matters and focusing on our mental health, focusing on what we have control over ultimately. So if you can move on, Zoe, and I just want to talk a little bit about the brain and just reassure people that actually many people, despite appearing completely stressed and overwhelmed and so on, are responding normally to this whole situation. So, you know, when we think about the brain, we have an amygdala, which is the sort of emotional driving center. And I always liken it to a little security officer whose job it is to keep us safe. And at the moment, our security officers are jumping up and down all over the place, feeling unsafe, are feeling threatened because there's no sense of predictability. There's no sense of what's going to come next. How am I going to be affected? Am I going to have a job that I feel secure in, that I'm happy to even go to once the lockdown is lifted? So there's that sense of fear, there's that sense of worry and anxiety, the sense of sadness that comes with loss of work and life as we know it, that sort of sense of normality. And some people will be feeling that sense of anger, just being irritable and short-tempered. And that's when we have those strong emotions, our emotional center basically raises our emotional arousal, and it floods our brain. We call it emotional hijacking. So our neocortex, which is where we do all our higher functioning, such as being rational and problem solving and being able to communicate with empathy and so on, that's completely hijacked. And so people aren't very good at communicating well and showing empathy and being able to think sensibly. We end up being in a situation where our amygdala, our security officers, oversensitive, behaving a bit like a smoke alarm, not quite knowing, do I need to leap up and down now and jump out because there's a real fire, or is it just someone's burnt the toast? And it's that sense of trying to help people calm down, understanding that our emotional arousal is really high at the moment, and we need to do things that look after us to bring our emotional arousal down, to increase that sense of safety and security. So we need to help our employees put their cortex back in control and give them that sense of being able to use it almost like a searchlight when they're problem solving, when they're planning for the future, rather than that spotlight that happens when we have that sort of black and white thinking, that sense of fight flight, which many people have been in. So if we move on to the next slide, I'm just going to list here really just some of the normal reactions that you might be seeing in people in your team. And it's really tricky. I know lots of people talk about mental health, and as soon as you hear the words mental health, people think about mental health problems. And I guess there's a difference between mental health problems and just those reactions, which are normal responses that people don't always think about. So everything listed on this slide in terms of, you know, having those negative thoughts, appearing withdrawn, feeling less motivated, being oversensitive and so on, those are normal reactions. They're not mental health problems. They're just responses that we have, and we really need to start to be concerned if they last for more than 2 weeks. So it's okay to have dips. It's okay to kind of feel these emotions, because these are normal responses. We wouldn't want people not to feel this. This shows that their brain's working properly. But if people are struggling with this over a long term, so for more than 2 weeks, then that's where you need to support them to seek help from friends, family, other professional colleagues, but also just to help people understand that actually it's okay to feel this. So a lot of your employees might feel worried about being open with you and saying, actually, I'm feeling really upset, I'm worried, I'm feeling, you know, I'm not sleeping properly and so on, because you may perceive that as a sign of weakness. And actually it's your job really to help them understand that it's okay to feel this, it's normal, and then also to help them try and identify ways to move forward, whatever small ways they might be. So if you've got concerns about an employee, it's about noticing through their tone of voice, being more observant, being really trying to be present when you are talking with that person and thinking, actually, how concerned am I? What sort of language are they using? What's their body language like? Noticing signs of their functioning just in terms of, how well they're engaging with work, whether they're happy about having calls with you, whether they're appearing more withdrawn and so on, and whether that's going on over a series of weeks. Moving on, in terms of those early warning signs, people used to think of working at home as a bit of a breeze, and I think people are seeing the reality of that now. And it takes quite a lot of discipline to be effective in our role in terms of staying well, staying healthy, and enjoying the benefits of that sort of flexibility that we have available. And as a manager, therefore, it's your role to try and reduce that risk of burnout with that system overload, because I think far from it being a breeze, people then end up having distractions for everything around the house and their children, and suddenly feeling the need to go and do lots of exercise because they've been told they're allowed to every day. And I think it's that sense of trying to help people work out how to fit all that in so that it feels realistic, and helping your employees understand, okay, what are their early warning signs? How do they know when they begin to feel out of control? How do they know when their emotional arousal's creeping up? And when you look at the chart on the left, if you think about that as your level of stress, your level of emotional arousal, when you wake up in the morning, hopefully it's really low, and then it might start to creep up a little bit, which is fine, because that's normal. You might stub your toe on the end of a bed or go to the fridge and realise you run out of milk or something. But then ideally it comes back down, and usually it takes about 20 minutes for emotional arousal to come back down if we're engaging with something calm or positive. But there will be peaks during the day, and it's about understanding when our stress is starting to creep up and being able to do something about it. If we stay in control and notice those early warning signs, then we can do something positive for ourselves to bring that back down. Most people, though, don't know their early warning signs, and when I ask people about, they're like, "Oh, I don't really know. I haven't really thought about that. I know when I'm full drive kind of overload, I'm really stressed, and I've kind of gone over the top of that kind of curve of just feeling a breakdown point, but I don't really know what happens when it starts to creep up." So, ask them, are you the sort of person who tenses your muscles, or is it that you begin to get forgetful, or you lose concentration, or do you get tearful, or you start biting your nails or picking, or, and help them identify what their signs are. And then once you've helped them identify that, it's identifying what are the sorts of things that they can do that can help reduce their emotional arousal. And knowing that only takes 20 minutes, encouraging them just to go and sit outside in their garden if they've got one, or read a magazine, or go for their walk if they haven't been out, or doing something positive that's about bringing that emotional arousal down to keep so they stay in control. So then moving on to the next slide, these strategies are really important, but you have to start with you. And I talk about mirror neurons a lot. So when, as a manager, you are someone who will set the tone for what's going on in your team. So if you are someone who has a positive outlook, a positive mindset, you're able to reframe and look at the future as a moment of opportunity and sort of discovery rather than threat and concern, that will really be mirrored in your team around you. So it's being very aware of who you are and how you are. So asking yourself those questions, such as how you're feeling, what are your biggest challenges, what's going well, what do you need help with, and identifying what you need to change to put yourself back in control. Because if you're feeling overwhelmed and your emotional arousal is really high and you're feeling stress and so on, you can't manage well, you cannot look after your teams well. So then moving on to navigating your role as a manager, and I've just put a list on the next screen, on the next slide, sorry, Zoe, about your important role, which is about supporting employees to feel safe. When they feel safe, which is about knowing that they have a role in the future of your company, knowing that they might be flexible and it will look different, and it might not be completely certain at the moment, but that you're keeping them in the loop, that will help reassure people. And then having clarity about what you do know and what you don't know, and reassuring people that they will be part of the future and that you're going to involve them in that process. Being realistic, so limiting goals, expect to achieve less. Don't expect your employees to try and achieve the same that they would have done previously. It's just not the same at the moment with different home circumstances. And so it's actually setting that as an expectation that you're expecting people to achieve less, but you're still expecting to achieve something so that they are still moving forward. Sharing work patterns, some of this Zoe's already mentioned, enabling employees to use their strengths, so allowing them to think what it is that they're good at and realising what their strengths are and actually what they're struggling with, and helping them to use their strengths more, looking at how to tweak their role. Giving them positive feedback, which is something that we're very good at doing when we see people face to face, less so on a day-to-day basis. So even if you're just dropping someone a text, it's not about having Zoom calls all the time because they feel far more formal. So it's just about the small methods of communication. Having those clear boundaries and telling people to switch off and actually telling them that you're prioritising mental health. Regular check-ins we've already mentioned, that sense of reassurance, and knowing and explain to people that we know there are different threats for different people. So those people who are furloughed might be feeling very anxious about if the people who are still working are going to have extra benefits compared to them, if they're going to be noticed more for different opportunities coming up. That sense of threat for furloughed employees could be potentially high at the moment. Okay, moving on to the next slide. So tips on having conversations. I'm not going to say too much about this at the moment, but I want to just put this in here to see you've got the information because you're going to be receiving these slides. But when you're talking with employees, it's about making sure that you're being very genuine and that making sure that you're really prioritising emotional health. So it's got to be genuine what you're talking about. Avoiding sort of cliches such as, chin up, because you hear people say that and it's like, oh my goodness. And avoiding assumptions, it's what something is like for you, it can be completely different for someone else. It looks different for each of us. If someone has mental health needs, do your homework and find out a little bit about them. So don't just assume you know what depression is like because you know someone who experiences it. Talk about other stuff. Don't just talk about mental health and COVID-19. Talk about normal life just as you would have done in the office. Ask about what's gone well. That's really important, how they're coping, what they're achieving. And using active listening skills. It's really important to build trust to use those active listening skills. Okay, so moving on. I also want to draw your attention to this website, which Human Givens website, which has an emotional needs audit on it, and it's a really useful way to engage your employees in terms of helping them think about what opportunities they have for their emotional needs to be met. So we need to have a sense of meaning in our lives and security and emotional connection to other people and so on, and those are really under threat at the moment, and they are different for furloughed workers compared to those working from home. So in terms of being stretched, or a sense of status, who we actually are, these will look very, very different depending on what stage your employees are at with their employment. So there's an emotional needs audit, which I've referenced on the slide, which is really, really useful to help people think about in a work context. Okay, so what sort of sense of meaning do I have from work at the moment? Do I feel safe? Is there a future? Am I being stretched? Do I still feel good about my role? And actually, it's your role as a manager which will help people really fulfill those needs or not. So it's about you looking at your organisation and helping them identify opportunities to meet those needs. Okay, moving on. I've just got a quote here which I really like because actually we talk often about we need more time, and we talk about, we blame a lot in terms of events causing our emotional upset. But actually, it misses the crucial role of cognition in determining our reactions. And the way we think about events can really significantly influence our feelings and our behaviour. So the way we think about stuff going on right now is what makes all the difference to our well-being. It's not about change. We can't change the reality of what's going on and what the government's going to say we are or aren't allowed to do next. It's really about what we think about it. So moving on to the next slide. There's if you think about the adversity, you're juggling, for example, juggling work with childcare and homeschooling. So in the top box for your beliefs. You could have these beliefs that this shouldn't be happening, this is really terrible, what if it all goes horribly wrong, I can't do this, I'm not the natural teacher, I'm not going to get my work done, what people are going to think about me. And when you have those sorts of beliefs, the consequences are high stress, high emotional arousal, black and white thinking. Your emotional arousal shuts off your cortex in terms of being able to think and perform well, and actually your outcomes are pretty dire in comparison to having beliefs that this is happening, but what can I do? I can handle it. I might not like it, but I can stand it. It's okay, I'm going to get through it. What's the worst that can happen? And when you have that positive mindset, it makes a huge difference to what the outcome is in terms of people being able to engage and perform. And it's your role as a manager to really help people reframe. If you hear that negative thinking, then it's for you to be able to say, well, hang on, how about, think about it like this, try and reframe it for your employees, identify their kind of inner critic, that negative voice, and you can help be an alternative perspective on that. And so just moving on, ask yourself these zoom out questions, ask yourself and ask your team these questions, because they help you increase your resilience on a daily basis. And you might do it daily, you might do it weekly, but it's thinking about, what have I done that has been good? What have I done that's worked? What have I done that I need to do more of? And then finally, I've just got some points on this slide about really what's important for you and to your team in terms of looking after your well-being. And we all know it's about some of these things like sleep, mindfulness, just bringing your focus of attention to the here and now and not worrying about the future, or letting your imagination sort of, your security officer rule. Your breathing, thinking about 7-11 breathing is a really good technique where you breathe out for longer than you breathe in. Triggers your parasympathetic nervous system, which is really, really helpful in terms of bringing that emotional arousal down. Clenching your muscles and releasing them, it feels calm. There's lots of suggestions, and you will have your own suggestions, your team will have their own ideas. It's helping people identify what works well for them. But most of all, the biggest difference to well-being at work is about engagement. And if people are engaged at work, it's the biggest factor in well-being. So it's about looking at that engagement piece, keeping people on board with the future and those changes. And that's all from me, Zoe.
Thanks, Lisa. So just what next then? So we're going to, as we said, we'll make sure that we send out to you all a copy of the recording of the webinar with the slides and any sort of FAQs as well that we've got. We'll place you on our mailing list if you're not already anyway, just to receive the ongoing information and updates that we give, tips, toolkits, that kind of thing that we send out, as well as a monthly newsletter. Lisa does lots of good blogs with some great tips and advice. So we'll keep you up to date with those. Feel free, obviously, to unsubscribe if you don't want to be part of that list. And for further help and advice, ongoing support on this, any other HR, wellbeing issues, topics, please do contact us. I popped our email addresses into the chat for you as well. We both offer free consultations, so please do feel free to give us a call. So really, just a chance to have a look if anybody did have any questions. I haven't had any through. We obviously have had a fair few questions on an ongoing basis at the moment. So what would probably be best for us to do is we'll put together an FAQ sheet that we can send out to you all with the most common questions on this topic and these areas, and we will send all that out to you in the coming days. So thank you to everybody today for logging on. Our contact details are on the screen now, so please do make a note of those and take advantage of the free consultation that we offer. And we look forward to speaking to you all again soon. Thank you.